Hey, my friends, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and this is going to sound a little bit morbid because it's a little bit morbid, but have you ever been around somebody who is going through the process of a difficult death? Because I had heard about people dying when I was a kid, and I knew that people died, but I was insulated from what that process looked like. And I'd heard of cancer and other debilitating diseases that take somebody downhill pretty aggressively. But then I witnessed it up close with a couple of people I loved very much. And it was a very different thing to be told so-and-so is dying or they're going to die in very vague terms versus actually seeing what that looks like, what it did to the body and what the steps of that process were going to be like. And of course, I'm sure a bunch of you have experienced this as well, there's this hit home moment that occurs the first time you really do the mental math as a person on what that kind of suffering looks like. The abstraction goes away and the reality starts to set in. It goes from being something cartoonish, comic bookish, movie-ish to something really real and human, and that really highlights the frailty and fragility and temporariness of what we have here. And likewise, in the Gospel of Matthew, somebody the disciples love very much has started talking about death a few chapters before the portion that we're looking at. In fact, it's in chapter 16, coming off of one of the highest moments in the relationship between the disciples and Jesus. You have all of this glorious, transcendent language, this confirmation of like, yeah, you guys, you're right. God has opened your eyes to this. Like, sure enough, the Christ, the Messiah, that's who you're talking to here. And you would think that it would stay on this high note. Like, well, if you're that, we're going to be together forever and this is going to be great. Right, Dad? And then we get the talk. And the very next thing that happens after that confession of Christ as the Messiah in chapter 16, the very next thing that happens is that we get told that from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples how he had to suffer many things at the hands of the chief priests and elders. I might not be getting that exactly right, and teachers of the law, and that he was going to have to be killed, but then he was also going to be raised to life. But then we go from a narrative expositional moment that just says he was telling them about this, and we start to get a few more specifics about what it's going to look like. In chapter 17, they go up onto the mountain, and the three guys in the inner circle of the disciples are up there with them, and Jesus is transfigured, and God shows up, and Moses and Elijah. It's this crazy experience, and coming back down the mountain, Jesus replies to them, and I'm going to look this one up because I don't know this verse very well. To be sure, Elijah comes and will restore all things, but I tell you, Elijah has already come, and they didn't recognize him, but they've done to him everything they wished. In the same way, the Son of Man is going to suffer at their hands. And that comment that he makes right there chases another one where he says, hey, don't tell anyone what you've seen in the transfiguration until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. So he's starting to now tease out some more details, and instead of us just being told by the narrator that he said this stuff, we're starting to get some quotes, some red letter stuff from Jesus as he gives us a little bit more about what this thing is going to look like. Well, then later in chapter 17, just a few verses later, it says they came together in Galilee, and Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men. They will kill him, and on the third day he will be raised to life. And then we fast forward to the passage that we've been looking at lately in Matthew chapter 20, and we're going to get even more of this language, but now it's getting explicit. Matthew 20, starting in verse 17, we're coming off of the first shall be last and the parable about the landowner and all the people he goes out and hires, the day laborers throughout the day, and it pivots to this. Now, as Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 disciples aside and said to them, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will turn him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. And on the third day, he'll be raised to life. There's some detail stuff here about geography and where we are in the narrative that I think it'll make more sense to look at tomorrow. But for now, let's just focus on the increasingly specific descriptions of death that we've seen from Jesus over these last few mentions. If we count Matthew's description at the end of chapter 16 about all of this prediction of death and being raised back to life as an acknowledgement from Jesus, and we really have 4 of these so far, 2 in chapter 17, 1 at the end of 16, and then this one in chapter 20. And what's interesting is that in all 3 that are straight from the lips of Jesus, he's using this same term, Son of Man. Now, at other times, people have called him Son of David. Remember the Canaanite lady at the end of, I think that's chapter 15, right? Yeah. Toward the end of chapter 15, she's like, Son of David. And other people who want mercy from him, like the blind guys, the blind dude said Son of David, didn't they? I got to look. Hang on. Did the blind dudes say that? Yeah, yes, they did. End of chapter 9, verse 27. Jesus went on from there. 2 blind men followed him, calling out, have mercy on us, Son of David. So it's interesting that we're seeing these titles of Jesus gravitate toward specific scenarios. Many people who are assuming a right posture before the king and understand his authority in this historical, religious, theological context, they go right to Son of David. Matthew would seem to be one of those people. The fact that he opens his gospel with the title Son of David effectively by the way that he spells out the genealogy, we can tell that we can count Matthew among those who assumes this right posture because this authoritative king is the Son of David. But Jesus likes the title Son of Man for himself. Now, we did an episode a long time ago, I can't even remember when at this point, where we covered a whole bunch of this. We looked at Ezekiel, where that term Son of Man comes up, which seems to really emphasize the humanity. But in Daniel chapter 7, this is your smoking gun Son of Man verse. It's the middle of Daniel 7. I don't remember exactly where it's at, but this is the one where Daniel has the vision, and there before me is one who looked like a son of man, or was like a son of man, coming on the clouds, and he went up to the Ancient of Days, and he was given authority and power over the nations, and people from all over the world worshiped him, and there's his kingdom that's going to be lasting forever. And so that son of man language that's described there in this dramatic passage in Daniel chapter 7, for Jesus to draw on that, well, it surely would have evoked the notion of his humanity as it did in the famous exchanges with Ezekiel, but it also would have evoked this idea that the Son of Man and all of the modesty that comes with that title is one who is going to be ordained by the Ancient of Days and who would be the establisher of this great and eternal kingdom. And that would have rung a bell for a whole bunch of people who would have remembered that God made certain promises to David about there being this eternal kingdom and this eternal king that's going to reign on that throne. And then Isaiah talks about this shoot that's coming up out of the burned out stump that is the line of Jesse. And it looks like everything is broken and everything is going to fall apart. And like all of the things that God is going to do are not going to work out when you look at the politics of the Old Testament. But when you look at Daniel 7, when you look at the different stuff in Isaiah chapter 53, which is relevant to the passage we're looking at as well, that's the business about how the Son of Man is going to be despised and rejected by men. When you look past the politics of the moment and the news cycle of the moment, and you look a little bit closer, what you see is that, no, it looks like God is still completely doing the thing that he was going to do, that he's still redeeming, and that all of the plans and all of the promises that he had put together are still in motion, and that there is going to be this great fulfillment that is coming, this Son of Man, this one who is like a son of man, who's standing before the Ancient of Days. And so the fact that Jesus keeps drawing on this language as he is more specifically explaining what is about to happen to him is not an accident. It's meant to conjure those prophecies. It's meant to remind people with not even that coded language that this is something they should anticipate because it's the completion of what God has been doing all along. But in addition to those prophetic overtones that we're talking about in Daniel and Isaiah, I also keep talking about the very humble human overtones that would come with the title Son of Man, more aligning with the exchange that we see in Ezekiel. And what could be more human than dying? That's something we all do. It's something we're all cruising toward. What could be more human than if you get stabbed, that kills you? Well, if you get stabbed the right way or in the right place. If you get nailed to a big chunk of wood and asphyxiated and you bleed out, you die. That's a very, very human thing to do. Death is a profoundly human experience, and Jesus is gradually spelling out more specifically that the Son of Man, emphasizing the humanity of Christ, is going to suffer the fate of humans. I want to talk about this passage with you some more. This is going to be one of those where I just keep on rolling. We turn it into 2 episodes. But real quick before we get out of here, a bunch of you have gone and checked out my buddy Shane's musical project called the Psalms Project. It's really, really good. Dude is a fantastic musician, but he's also excellent with the Bible. And what he's doing is going through the Psalms and literally putting them all to modern music. But he's doing a ton of research and study and translating to nail the meaning and to present it in a way that is faithful to the text. It's excellent stuff. I've got great feedback from so many of you on it. So you can go over to Spotify and listen to anything he's done. But he's also got a brand new psalm coming out, Psalm 42. It's not even released yet. If you want to go and hear it, you can go to thepsalmsproject.com/TMBH, and you can download it for free before it comes out. I mean, straight up, he's my friend. No money is exchanging hands here. This is free, and I think it's something you're really going to appreciate. Again, thepsalmsproject.com/TMBH will get you a free download of the not yet released Psalm 42, which I believe you are going to love. All right, more on this Matthew 20 prediction of the specifics of the crucifixion passage mañana. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.